for June 23rd, 2022. We're going to open with the Pledge of Allegiance. We're going to open up with our first public comment. Come down, just state your name, and we limit the comments to 5 minutes. Yes, please. And just there's a green light on the microphone, if you could just push it in the center.
Thank you so much. My name is Sarah Colvin. I'm the Communications Manager for the Cape Cod Commission. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here this evening. I just wanted to let all of you know that the Cape Cod Commission is hosting its 8th annual One Cape Summit on August 1st and 2nd. It'll be again at the Wequassett Resort in Harwich. We are looking forward to convening again this year in person. We have not done so since 2019, so it'll be wonderful to get all of the leaders from Cape Cod together again. Over the course of the summit, attendees will hear from those local to Cape Cod, as well as others from across the country, on efforts to improve housing affordability and accessibility, address marine and freshwater quality, mitigate and adapt to climate change, and promote sustained economic vitality, among other regionally significant topics. As we've done in the past, we're partnering with the Cape and Islands Municipal Leaders Association to host their August breakfast at the One Cape Summit, and that meeting will take place at 7:30 in the morning on August 2nd at the Wequassett Resort. It'll run for about an hour to an hour and a half, and the summit will begin at 9. And I'm here to invite all of the select board members, as well as the town manager and assistant town manager, to attend the breakfast as well as the full summit if you are able. And we will follow up. If you've not received one already, you will be within the next few days getting an email that includes registration information, and you'll hear from the Cape and Islands Municipal Leaders Association about the breakfast meeting as well. So we hope to see you all there, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I do have some printed invitations as well, so let me know if you'd like me to just leave them here or
That'd be great,
give them to Heather. Thank
Thank
you.
John, just push it to the light.
Microphone up some. There you go. Green light.
Okay. Jonathan Finn, 3 Chipman Road, resident, taxpayer, and I'm also chairman of the local comprehensive plan steering committee. I'm not here in that capacity tonight, but I did want to make a quick comment related to the green communities discussion that's going to be coming up in this meeting. This is indeed the time to get green communities moving in Sandwich. We're lagging now. I believe 89% or 85% of the communities in the state have moved forward and become certified. 3 years ago, voters said they wanted this to happen at town meeting, and for whatever reason, the will of those voters at town meeting has been ignored. This is sad. It has to start moving. I encourage you to take a look at the minutes of the local comprehensive plan steering committee meeting and public records of the numerous public forums that were held for residents. I believe, Mr. Holden, I believe Charlie was the only member of the board that was able to attend the forums, and we appreciate his participation in that, or I appreciate his participation in that. But through these forums, the public clearly stated that they want Sandwich to be designated as a green community. They want to realize the taxpayer benefits of that. They want Sandwich to be environmentally forward, and this needs to move forward. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment?
I'm Judith Holt from Summer Street in Sandwich, and I have here a map of all the communities that have adopted the green Communities Designation Program. This is brand new. It was at 80%. It's now at 85%. That means 299 towns out of 351 have adopted this program, and they all are benefiting from the money that is available through the grants of these programs. Over $113 million of grants have been issued through this program, all for energy projects and energy efficiency projects. So I have this to pass around to you to take a look, and I agree it is time for this, especially with the projects we have going on in the schools. Many of those would qualify for this program, and that's an $8 million plus line item for the town. I also have information on training I receive constantly on building codes. I don't want to bore you with that, but if there are any questions that come up on that, I have some supportive information here to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the review and approval of minutes from June 9th, 2022. They're in the packet.
Move we accept the minutes as written.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. We're going to move on to the town manager report.
In terms of upcoming meetings, our next meeting is in 2 weeks on July 7th at 7 o'clock here. And then next week, the Finance Committee is meeting on Monday night, which is the 27th. And the primary purpose is to consider the reserve fund transfers for fiscal year 2022, which, although the official end date is June 30th, by the time final bills roll in from that time period, it's usually mid to late August before the books are closed. But pleased to say that as it looks right now, there's only one department that's in deficit, and that's the fire overtime. So as the board's aware, we tried to take steps to help us for the new budget that will start on July 1st. So that's before them. And then I was just going to explain to the committee the financial reorganization that we've talked about a couple times, just so they're aware of that. A couple of other quick updates. I had mentioned a few weeks ago that we had applied for our county allotment of ARPA funds, just over roughly $850,000. So far only 3 towns have applied. All 3 towns have been asked to provide more information. We provided more information. We've now been asked to provide more information. So it's been a little bit of frustrating, but we're hopeful to work our way through the process and hopefully get that released soon. So Heather and Dave Mason and I are working on that. A couple of other things I thought you might be interested in, I left in front of your desk. So the state had a free giveaway on home COVID tests, and I think only about a third of the communities applied for it, but we did, and so we got just under 3,700 tests delivered to the Board of Health recently. So I think they have them there if people are interested in picking them up for free from homeowners, but they left one for each town employee. So there's yours, and each test contains 2 test kits. So all told, just right around 7,400 tests. And again, that was free of charge from the state. I know there's been some publicity nationally and then also with the state about the Attorney General's office trying to work out part of the national opioid settlement. So I know the board's aware of this, but we were one of the fewer number of towns across the state that actually filed all the appropriate information within the required time frame. So we were an early sign on community for that effort. But all told, it looks like over about a 15-year period, we should be receiving about $1,040,000. And that will come with strings attached to it on what the funds can be used for. But we'll be working on that as those funds start to roll in. They haven't yet. We've told the first allotment may be coming in the next few months. So we'll see about that. We haven't gotten our second allotment of ARPA funds yet. As you know, we got our first one, which was just over $1 million, probably 8 months ago, and we're waiting for the second one, and we're told that should be coming fairly soon as well. Trying to think of anything else. I think most other things we were going to cover later on in the agenda.
I heard three good things there, Bud. And it's things that I'm assuming that you and the staff here have done, but there's three things that you applied for, one of which was for millions of dollars that only 3 towns on Cape applied for, so we're in on that. The test kits, we were one of the only towns in the state to apply for the test kits, and we got those. And the opioid money, we're one of the few towns in the state that applied for that, and we're in the running for that. So thank you for staying on top of what.
Well, fortunately, in the end, every community's getting opioid money.
Right, but
We should have gotten a little more because we were on the ground floor. So.
But, that all,
Yeah.
For me is, on the board and for the taxpayers at home, that we do have somebody here that's watching, for all this, quote unquote, free money from the state, and it's coming to us. So that, that's a good thing. So thank you for doing that. Anybody else? Bobby?
I've had a few people ask me about the wing school project, how that's coming. And I talked to Bud today, a little bit of information, but he can go over that, I think, or Heather can.
Yeah, that's a terrific project. That was a great project when the town endorsed it, and it remains a really fine project. If you recall, the funding source, tax incentive financing, is a funding cycle that they are applied to. There were 100 applicants in the last round. 50 of those applicants were asked to apply to the second round. We were not among those, nor do we expect to be among those. There'll be another round this spring, or this coming fall. It's called a mini round. I spoke with our developer today. They're actually advancing the architectural design to 85%, and they'll be applying submitting those drawings to the state hopefully this fall. They also do not expect to be funded in that round, but what they will get is a full review from the state architect and from the Department of Housing and Community Development. So when the next round comes around, probably in the 2023 timeframe, we'll be in a position to be funded. Now remember, we had not expected to be funded in our first round, and we are a full 12 months behind because nothing happened during the COVID period. Now, I'll add to that, we do know that the state is not fully staffing all of its programs, including the programs that support the administration of these grants. So I don't want to be overly dismal, but I don't think things are going to be as fast as we'd like them to. But everything we hear is that this is a fundable project. It is being applied to an appropriate funding source. And as soon as those funds are available, it will be awarded. So we feel really good about the project, same as we did when we came to you the first time. It's just going to require some patience.
Yeah, the mini round actually provides some optimism, I think.
Yeah, oh yes, that should. The fact that the developer is continuing, as we've seen, they went through the zoning board, they have their comprehensive permit, they had to develop their plans, site plan and architecturals fully to get all of their permits, which is not an inexpensive exercise. They've done all that, and they continue to work with their architectural team and engineers to bring design documents for that development up to 85% design, which is a big investment on a project of that size. So that speaks positively to the project.
Very
I just
encouraging.
would add, the same developer, Stratford Capital Group, or SCG Development, has just finished a very similar project called the Oxford House, I believe. It's in Fairhaven. Very similar situation, Oxford Schoolhouse. It was a school in Fairhaven called the Oxford School. They rehabilitated the school and created affordable housing there. So if anyone wants to take a trip up to Fairhaven and take a look at the very last project that they've done, that's it. Ours is next. Ours is the next in their queue. We really have to wait for the funding. Sorry so long.
All good things.
So the superintendent's office is safe for a while? Okay.
I think I got, I know I brought it up before. The old police station, I guess, is finally done, right? Looks good. The new roof and whatnot.
Yeah, the roof is done. I think there's some gutter work in the back that still needs to happen, but we received a donation, as you recall, from Home Depot. So we received all of the materials as a donation, and then we hired a roofing contractor to put the roofing materials on. You will see on your next agenda, the Mass Military Support Foundation license agreement has been finalized. We're just waiting for the final blessing from Town Council, but we met with the leaders of the Mass Military Support Foundation, Inc. on site earlier this week, walked through all of the issues with all the town departments, and so you'll see that coming back to you very soon.
Very good. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead.
I think one other thing I should point out, because I know we talked about it a little bit at our last meeting, but DEP, the State Department of Environmental Protection for our region, is considering some new Title V and wastewater restrictions and requirements, and so they haven't quite formally proposed what those changes would be, but their team is going to meet with us next Tuesday so we can find out a little bit more about it, and I'm sure we'll be asking the same questions we have been about how this could relate and help with our regional efforts at the base, but also with the disposal capacity at the base as well, because if I think it's fair to say if these regulations go into effect, it's going to force everyone to move much faster, including the state, in terms of approving some things that they haven't approved yet, or consider some things that really were off the table. So I think it's going to require all of us to move faster, but in the long run, it's what we need to do.
It's not getting less restrictive.
No.
But Channel 6 o'clock news covered this whole thing tonight, just so you know. So it's out in the public anyway. Second, is that what you meant, Sue? The algae in the pond. Somebody want to address that? It's not new, but it,
Yeah, it's a naturally occurring phenomenon. It's been really bad, I would say, the last 5 years, and this seems to be far and away the worst year so far. It's all related to a number of things: fertilizers on people's lawns, road runoff, normally occurring things in a pond that's pretty old. Patrick will remember that there was a pretty detailed study done of the pond 25 plus years ago, and we had someone who was recommending a certain type of treatment for the pond, and then it ended up not happening because there was pushback about putting treatment in the pond, and so that was never done. It's something, I don't think it would solve the problem. So we're trying to do several things in terms of, if you remember, some of the money from the WIF that was appropriated 2 or 3 town meetings ago, including the specials, included funding to work on the drainage around Upper and Lower Shawn Ponds. So all those plans have been being worked on, and I think some of them are going to be bid fairly soon. So our wastewater person has been on vacation, our consultant, so when they get back, we'll check on that. But there's not a quick solution. The odors are terrible. I don't think it's unhealthy, but the odors are really bad once it sits there for a while.
As we move toward Independence Day, the boat parade kind of causes me a concern anyway.
Yeah.
Is there any type of like something with the whiff cover, like something like a skimmer going in there, or is that not?
I don't know. I know another town on the Cape has one. Maybe we try that just to see if it would work. I don't.
Right.
I mean, there is a lot of material out there. We noticed earlier tonight.
Yeah.
Drove by. It's bad.
Also, one of the things about, we call it Shawn Pond, but remember, it's flooded meadow. So it really never was a pond. Without the dam structures upper and lower, it's a stream that meanders through this meadow. And then on top of that, you add in development that's taken place, from one end of the pond to the other. I think nutrients from lawns are going to contribute to it, and I think irrigation systems on properties are going to drive that water faster into that water body. So this is the earliest that it's been this bad. So it's generally a late July, August event. This is really bad.
Yeah.
But one year, didn't we get a vacuum truck in there?
We did.
Pretty sure we did.
I remember
of
the
July.
park staff was in raking quite a bit and recreation. I mean, it only does so much for so long. It's hard to.
Our issues, interestingly enough, were always more washing the shoreline because of the Canadian geese. And while we were doing that, we cleaned up the first 10 feet of the shoreline. But right now, the rack line is
Yeah.
100 feet offshore.
Yeah.
So the volume of material that you would have to take out would be so great that it wouldn't be successful. And then you have to picture paddling down the pond in the dark and getting out and stepping in it, and boats coming ashore, and that all over the bottom of all the boats that are in and out of the pond. So that's another concern, so. But we did have an alternative at one point when we had Lyman Associates do the study of the pond. I believe it was in the mid-90s. There was an alternative of draining the pond during the winter months for a period when there was an approaching like polar vortex. Because what that does is it allows the weeds to sit on the muck. And when they freeze, it kills their connection to the muck. And then when you reflood the pond, you float the vegetation and it'll be brought out to sea. And it's worked really well. It works. It works. The gamble is the winters are warmer and warmer, so timing that vortex. But it could be as simple as anticipating that we were going to have that kind of a cold spell, perhaps 5 days hence, and pulling the planks and just letting the thing, it'll drain out fast. We've had to do it each time we've repaired our own dams, and it's not uncommon. Wildlife handles it really well because they go right into the turtles, and amphibians will just go right into the mud, and they survive.
Anybody else? Okay.
On this in particular, or?
No, just the town manager. If you-
No, nothing else for the town manager. I've got a
Okay.
couple of things for correspondence.
I'll let you lead off for correspondence.
I'm fine. I'm hearing, I think, that we don't think that skimming in the near term is going to help the pond.
I don't know.
Right, Patrick?
Yeah, no, I don't think I just don't think it's practical to have it.
Okay.
It would not be an enriching experience. I just leave it at that.
How many permits did we need?
Yeah, well,
Yeah, well, that's the other thing.
so do we consult the Board of Health to see what they say? They're the experts, I guess.
I don't think it's dangerous, though.
Dave, it's
I don't know.
not harmful. So Dave
We've already-
sent several town departments a summary, just because a lot of us have been getting called. I know Melissa in our office was reading off from the summary for some people the last few days. I think I left it on my desk downstairs, but yeah, they're aware of it. I don't know how much a difference it's going to make long term.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Yeah.
Is there something we could push over the dam, or is it you got to get it out of the pond? 'Cause I think if it's over the dam, right?
Yeah, if you pull the plug on all the
let's-
boards, like Patrick said, it'll move.
Yeah.
It'll be gone. It'll go right down there.
Use a fire truck to push it off.
Yeah, we would typically wash the shoreline with a truck. But again, even the Canadian geese won't go through it. It's telling.
Yeah. Okay. We'll look into it. Yeah.
Keep going, Charlie.
Okay. On the 13th, I attended the Bikeways and Pedestrian Committee meeting. Stephen Rhodes from VHB made a presentation of expanded options to link the proposed shared use paths along the service road to the canal path. The best option may well be Route 130 to Morse Road, through the fish hatchery, to Route 6A, to Tupper Road, to Freezer Road. Mr. Rhodes could well provide estimated costs as well as additional insights in time for the next meeting. Also, all the members of the Bikeways and Pedestrians Committee are interested can be reappointed, so that was good news. I attended the school committee meeting on the 15th. Mr. McNamara's presentation of the bullying prevention and intervention plan was well received. And then, having attended the school safety group meeting earlier, suffice it to say that concern is a priority of the school department as well as emergency services in the safety perspective. Then this morning, I participated in the initial return of boardwalk planks to donors. Everyone seemed pleased, and some of the reactions were actually moving. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Charlie, how are they gonna get across 130, did they say? Are they gonna build something, or just?
We really can't hear anybody.
Oh, wow.
I said, the bike committee, have they decided how they're gonna cross 130?
Well, it's all on the same side of the road, that the parking and the parking and the path are on the north side of Route 130, and the connection to through the hatchery is on the north side
I see what you're
as
saying.
well.
Okay.
So there'll be no crossing of Route 130 in this plan.
Okay. Anybody else? Seeing, okay, Mike.
Yeah, I just have one comment. We're not gonna have another meeting before the 4th. And if you remember last year, we had a lot of complaints because we locked the parking lot from residents from using the beach on 4th of July. I would hope that they would, whoever's doing it, because we're not gonna be voting on it because it's not on the agenda, but did you let at least residents stick a hold of people into the beach parking lot so they could use the beach on 4th of July?
Yeah, I'll check with fire, police and fire what their plans are. Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, we're going to move on to staff meeting. Town Planner Leanne Drake, potential adoption of the Green Communities Act and required follow-up.
Good evening, Leanne Drake, Town Planner, Special Projects Administrator. Thank you for having me here tonight. I was just going to provide a brief overview of the Green Communities Program and the criteria necessary for designation. So the Green Communities Program is a state program that's run by the Department of Energy Resources. It provides grants and technical assistance to municipalities to help them reduce energy usage and costs. There's 5 criteria needed for designation. The first criteria is to adopt as-of-right siting for renewable or alternative energy solutions. We currently satisfy this criteria, as in our zoning bylaw, we have large-scale solar photovoltaic allowed by right in our flex zoning district and our industrial zoning district. So as of right now, criteria 1 we satisfy. Criteria number 2 is to adopt expedited permitting. So this means that if an applicant were to move forward with a permit for renewable energy, the town is going to certify that it would not take the applicant more than a year to acquire that permit. In the past 3 years, we've had multiple solar permits throughout going through the planning board. The longest permit took about 3 months to get through. So this is something we feel confident that we can abide by. It requires a letter from town council certifying that there is nothing in our zoning bylaw precluding an applicant from receiving a permit within a year. Number 3 is to create an energy reduction plan to reduce energy use by 20% in 5 years. So this one requires a little bit more work. So I did reach out to the Cape Light Compact, and they would be happy to create the energy reduction plan for us and do our baseline. So basically, all of our municipal buildings, including our schools, would be evaluated for their current energy consumption. And then after the fact, they would put forward a plan with targeted goals for us to reduce that consumption by 20% over the course of 5 years. Number 4 is for us to adopt a fuel-efficient vehicle purchasing policy. So this would be an inventory of our current fleet of municipal vehicles, and then the Board of Selectmen would adopt a policy stating that when practicable, and cost-effective, you would purchase electrical vehicles. There are exemptions for this, so some of the DPW heavy-duty trucks are exempt, and some of our public safety vehicles would also be exempt from this criteria. Then the last criteria is criteria number 5, which is the adoption of the stretch code. This would require a town meeting vote as it is a general bylaw adoption. So currently, we work off of the base building code. This would be higher standards for energy efficiency. It is currently very similar to the base building code. Every 3 years, there's an update to the base building code and the stretch code. We are currently going through an update. So as of right now, the stretch code should be adopted by the state by the end of summer, early fall. So we're not 100% sure what that looks like currently. I did reach out to the regional coordinator for the Green Communities Act, which is Lisa Sullivan. She's been before the board before. And she suggested that she come down and present the differences to the board, either when it gets adopted late summer, early fall, and she could go through the stretch code with you then. In terms of a timeline, applications open July 1 for this round, and they close December 30th. After speaking with Cape Light Compact and the state, if this is something we'd like to move forward with, there is potential that we could get our application in by December 30th and then be able to be funded January, maybe February 2023. So in 2019, our estimated grant funding amount was $170,000 just for becoming a green community. And then once you spend that first allotment of money, you can apply for any more grants for any specific projects that we would have in town. I'm happy to take any questions. That's just the general overview of the program.
Did I hear you right that the state may adopt the stretch code as their building code? Is that what you're saying?
No, sorry, they're updating the stretch code currently. So every 3 years, they update the base building code, and then they update the stretch code. So they're going through that update right now. So we don't have the final codes as of right now, but by the end of summer, early fall, they're hoping to have approved those, so we would know what we're looking at moving forward.
So I guess, is it possible that the state is going to adopt the stretch code? Because that's one of the issues that we've talked about here, is concerns about the stretch code.
Yes.
Versus the building code.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be an issue if the state's going to make it mandatory anyway.
Yeah, so they're not adopting the stretch code as the base building code. They're just updating each code. And then once you're a member of the green communities, every 3 year, your stretch code gets updated by the state.
It's pretty close. I mean, it's the base
close
building code, and I see nodding from our building commissioner, but it's pretty close. There's not a tremendous difference between the base code and the stretch code. There's a few other additional requirements, like the blower door testing. There's a couple other things that are required. So it's not a huge leap from one to where we are today to where the stretch would be. It's not a huge.
You had to do that house thing, right?
Yeah, it adds cost. I mean, there's no doubt. Like if you don't get if you take off the grants and the tax credits and all those things that go with it, the cost is higher, for meeting that code, because it's more stringent of a building, which is what happened. There's not you're adding more, and there's more labor. There's more,
And the other question I had is on the 5-year 20% reduction. If we get the huge solar panels on the high school, which if it goes our way, the way we want it to go, we could save $500,000 to $600,000. Would that be applied towards this?
Yes. Yep. So any lighting initiatives, even our vehicle policy would help with the energy reduction. The school upgrades are definitely going to help with reducing energy output. So it seems like a lot to reduce 20%, but a lot of towns have found it very easy once the policy is in place.
Do you know? So one of the questions that I'm going to ask is a lot of with the green communities, a lot of it is grant based. It's not guaranteed money. Is that correct? So, I guess my question would be surrounding cost. The difference between, because and I'll preface this by saying I'm all for, like the environment, saving money, saving emissions. fishing, hunting, all that stuff. So like it's, things that we do, especially just being outside with climate change. But my question always comes if the town adopts basically the principle of the green community without going through the grant process, is there, and the example I'm going to use is the boilers at the high school, or the boilers at the Oak Ridge and the Forestdale. By going through the MSBA, the additional steps that they put in place, even though we're buying the same boiler at the base level for efficiency, but by going through the MSBA or going through the, the green community projects steps, the cost was double, but we got like a little less than half back through a grant potentially. So the question I have is if we adopt the green community standards ourselves, is there a cost saving to doing that independently versus going through, the Green Community Act? Because one of the questions I have is like, if you don't meet the 20%, or if we don't get the solar panels, or we don't get that, what are the consequences? Because I'm assuming that there would be financial consequences or elimination of grant monies moving forward.
Yeah, so they wouldn't ask for any grant funding back. So say if in 5 years' time we did not reach the threshold, they would work with us to continue to try and reach that threshold, and then maybe we would miss out on that year's allocation. So the 170,000 I spoke about is when you get designated, that's your community's annual amount every year. You do have to apply for that amount, but you pretty much always receive that amount. And then there's competitive grants that you can go for your larger scale projects. So once you spend your 170,000, you can then apply for more funding. The highest I've seen awarded was 320,000 to a community that was doing school updates and repairs.
Right. And then the other thing was just on the one thing that I want to look at, I guess more closely would be because some of the things that as you read through is like you can't recycle vehicles. Like we sometimes take a DPW truck and send it over to the recreation department, that you can't do that anymore. But it's the cost not for the first cycle, but it's the second cycle. So if you in theory, if you got electric cars or hybrid cars, I'll pick on the electric cars, even though I've looked at it myself to purchase. But it's it's not only the car, but it's the charging station, and because we're a municipality, it's adding those charging stations at prevailing wage public bid process. So it's there's a cost exponential factor on that. But it's when you take the grant away for the second time purchase, like, and I'll just say if the electric car is $10 and the hybrid car is $5, we're going to have to come up with that money. Like I talked to Bud and Heather about it, but you have to plan to spend a lot more money on that second and third cycle for the replacement. So that's just some of my concern is I don't want to price ourselves out or have ourselves tied to something where there's a consequence that we can't get out of it and say, well, now we're forced to buy these and we have to cut somewhere else to meet those requirements. I just don't know what those costs look like, or I'd want to see that.
Sure. Yeah, with the electric vehicle policy, if there's one available and if the cost isn't unpractical for the municipality, you are expected to buy an energy efficient vehicle, and that is the policy you would be adopting.
That word practical is in there.
Yes, and they
No
do
one's-
not define that.
No one is defining what practical is. I mean, in all seriousness, if we're talking recession now, if you haven't been following the papers. And if you were in the middle of this and we got to replace a car and we have to replace it in an energy savings way or whatever, and it's 20,000 more than a car that doesn't have that, is it practical for us to say we're not going to do that and that's okay with the green community?
They do say that it has to be cost effective, but again, they didn't define that term. So I would have to ask the state exactly, what do they mean by cost effective? Is it a $5,000 difference? Is it a $20,000 difference?
And I just want to address, like, there's a lot of head nodding out here, like one way or the other. But what I want everybody to understand is that we're asking these questions because we're put in charge to be fiscally responsible to all taxpayers. So if this is something that's going to impact everybody, whether there's a cost savings now, there's a cost savings down the road, is that we have to fiscally plan out. We're already planning basically 2 years ahead for the next budget cycle. So I just want everybody to know that these questions, we're not saying that it's no, We're not saying that, you know, this, we have to ask these questions to be fiscally responsible with all the taxpayers' dollars, you know, moving forward.
Yeah, and one of the other issues is it's one thing if you've got electric and gas in a car, because if the power goes out like it has for 4 or 5 days here after a storm, it's gonna be very difficult to charge your electric car. But you can get away with it if you've got a hybrid with gas, at least you can, because you'll get a gas station. And that's what my concern is. Are they gonna say that is the Green Committee's position that you want all electric cars, or
No, there's hybrid options too. Yep.
Pat?
I think with something like this, so if we're 3 years tardy on this, and we would have gotten 170,000 a year, then we've actually given up 700,000 already. So it's one thing to be congenial about potential costs in the future, but it's also when the money's right there to be put in your hand. And I just, you know, I have a lot of faith in people. I have a lot of faith in my society where I live, and I have a lot of faith in local government. And I've been part of it pretty much my whole adult life. So when I look at something like this, and I see 200-plus communities having the good faith to go with this for the benefit of the town, the planet, I just can't, this just shocks me, because we don't go backwards. We put, for example, expensive California emissions products on our cars during the oil embargo in 1973, and we've never taken them off. We don't go that way. We're not going there. We can't live on this planet if we go that way. This is like, I don't know, this is like embarrassing to me. Let's just get on with this. I mean, what is it that all of these other communities have grasped that we haven't?
Yeah, Leanne, thank you, Patrick. And the way number 4 is written, I don't have a concern with what that says.
Yep.
Might just be me, but I don't.
No, I don't either. And I spent my life buying DPW equipment. I mean, you're not going to buy heavy trucks electric. But we have a lot of people who work for this town who just simply ride around from building to building or job site to job site, or inspection vehicles that just go out, that don't require heavy four-wheel drive vehicles that are very costly to use, that could very easily be part of a shared electric fleet. And we have a lot of communities that have done that already.
I have a question for you. On vehicles, now we have that option to buy a electric gas vehicle when we
Yes.
purchase?
Yep. Fuel-efficient vehicles, they have hybrid and full electric vehicle in the policy.
So we have our choice. We can do either or.
Yeah, when available, whichever is available to you.
Okay.
That's how
I
it's
know
worked.
somebody who just bought a Ford F-150. It runs on gas and electric. When it's going slow, it runs on the electric, and when it speeds up, it runs on the gas.
Yeah.
So if we had somebody that had to make a trip or something like that, it wouldn't behoove them, if they took an electric, they'd have to stay overnight or whatever, or they couldn't make the full trip. But they could have a gas and electric hybrid then. Okay, so we have our choice.
Yeah, it's not about me, Bob, but I happen to own a hybrid, and it's great.
Yeah, yep, okay.
And I just have one other, I agree with you, Patrick, there's a place for this. And there are places for it. But in all seriousness, I just want to make sure, we're talking to the public. We're gonna be eventually deciding this. I know town meeting has to decide on one major part of this, on the stretch code. But I think, in all seriousness, I read through this stuff too, and it is confusing, and we're giving away power of a board to another agency. And that necessarily isn't wrong, but I just want to make sure the public understands that if we do this, there are some things that come with it. And we are committed to a process over time. And if, I don't have a problem with it, or they don't have a problem with it. But I did have a question when I was looking at their breakdown of construction costs and what it would save a home and all that. And I had a question for you, Shane. If you look at it, it says Windows, they set a value of the code system, and make it simple. 55 is like what they're averaging, and the savings go up and down or losing them, and they're trying to get you there. And they use examples of a base coat of a house that they're working on at 64, so they're trying to get it down. And it says they want a window and a value on the windows, I guess, in glass of a 30/30. And the stretch code would drop it to 2730, and it would only cost $500. But if every window had to go because it wasn't at that level, is it $500 a window? Or,
It doesn't really break it down on this, like as far as what the, I mean, a lot of the windows meet that, most of it
would
anyway.
already meet it?
Yeah, so it's not, some of these things, like going from a 95% propane furnace to a 96%, if you're in that, we're talking, and that's really what when I said that the base code is very similar to the stretch code, is that you're looking at these things as like a 1% difference. It's less than, it's a 1% on the efficiency of the furnace, the SEER rating on the, the cooling, your air conditioning is a 13 to a 15. You're not talking, huge differences, between the two. But there is there's a cost if you're not, choosing, like, if it's I think, Brendan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the Anderson windows meet the stretch code anyway as a base level. Not to single out, I have to say the disclaimer, not that we're using or advocating Anderson windows, but, most of theirs at the base level, the E rating on the windows meets the stretch code to begin with.
Can we have the building inspector come up and just give us a quick scenario on the stress code so we understand it? He should know, I would think. Maybe we can better understand it if he'd explain it to us,
So basically, we're working off the building code here in Sandwich. We're not working off the stretch code as yet. My understanding, having worked many years ago in towns where the stretch code was required, my understanding is that right now the base code and the stretch code are very similar, as Shane had mentioned. There's a few variables. The blower door test is something that's a little different, but not anything of any great substance. And the other thing with the stretch code, like anything, there are trade-offs. You can trade off if you've got more insulation in one particular section, then you can forego meeting the requirement on another section. So it's all calculated in a rating at the end. So there are trade-offs and there are opportunities to compensate for where things are lacking.
How about, like Mike was saying about the cost? Is it compatible to the regular code now, or is it going to cost more or less?
Well, the current base code has gotten to the point that it's up there with the stretch code at this point. And I'm not involved in building anymore. I'm sure Shane could comment better on that. But my understanding is that the codes are very similar, so therefore the costs are going to be comparative.
I mean, if you're, it's one of those things when you're building a new house and you say to the homeowner, do you want it to be, how efficient do you want the furnace for an extra $500? You get the more efficient one. It's going to save you money in the long run. Chances are the person's, it's the same, guts of the machine, same guy working on it. They're going to change to the more efficient one for $500. It saves them money over time. It's things like that.
But this only applies to new construction anyway.
The stretch code is construction only there.
Right, so it's only for new homes, it's not for restorations, it's not for, my question would be, and maybe Heather, you would know, would this affect the wing school project?
The wing school project will be held to very high energy standards that the state will require them to be held to.
They knew that when we.
Oh, yeah. Those are changing, and there will probably be more stringent by the time the project gets to full design.
Just to follow up on that, they did let us know that they've built in stretch code communities previously and that they always build to stretch code now, regardless of whether it's required or not. So it would not affect the project.
Yeah, they're building in the cost ahead of time for the more stringent requirement before they even go to plan anyway.
And the wing school would be all new construction, obviously, so they would have to comply.
Brendan, just the only question I would have is, when somebody eclipses the 50% rule and they're required to bring it up to current code on an alteration or addition, so like let's say if it's a house, and I'll pick on the cottages on the beach. If somebody had one that was, they're going to do, in excess of 50%, they're going to bring it up to current code, would that force that remodel to go to the stretch code?
Are you talking about flood zone issues?
Yeah, like when you're required to upgrade the house, when you exceed 50% of the value. And you,
So in the flood zone areas, if you exceed 50% of the market value of the structure, you have to comply with building code requirements for construction in a flood zone. That specifically means elevating the house if you're in a V zone. But as far as insulation and energy requirements, they wouldn't pertain to the flood zone requirements.
it's really just getting it. So when those requirements to bring it up.
So basically, the saying is, when you open up a wall, there's a cavity, obviously, between the
Fill it
studs, and
back to capacity.
fill the cavity is the requirement.
Yep, okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure. Okay, do we need a vote on this? Yeah.
Sorry, Leanne, I should have asked you this 8:30 to 4:30, not now. Where we've built new buildings, police, fire, center for active living, those 3 buildings are massive. They're incredibly efficient, they're incredibly modern, but they use way more electricity than the smaller buildings we left. How does that factor into the 20%? Are new buildings exempt if you're adding more square footage?
No, there's a calculation that they do. So based on the square footage of the building, they would do your baseline. And if you're using energy efficient modeling in it, then
Should be fine.
you should be fine, exactly. So the 20%, I mean, they target the older buildings for the 20%. So it may be, all the schools reduce our output by 20% and the other municipal buildings don't, but it's overall not building specific.
Yeah, I guess it's up to the board if, how you want to proceed.
One question I had, when does the 20% kick in? If we do this, we put solar panels on the police department, we've got solar panels on Center, well, it's gonna be the Center for Active Living, we've got the school, big one coming, hopefully. Could all those be used as an offset for that 20%, or does it have to be after we join?
Yeah, so after we join, if we did it this year, we would be designated in January, and then we would have 5 years to show a reduction plan. But our baseline could be done this summer, so they could count. So once the baseline's been adopted by the board, then all of our projects would count towards
So
energy.
these would be in it, the baseline probably. The ones that are already in existence would be part of the baseline, not the 20% reduction. You'd have to reduce from that baseline.
You would have to reduce from that baseline, yeah.
I'm just thinking to make sure we could do it if we're gonna do it,
It's an achievable goal. It's not set up for failure. It's an achievable goal.
And it would be, so Cape Light Compact contracts out to Rise Engineering, so they would be the one that would perform the baseline and the energy reduction plan for us. And it's a tailor-made plan with step-by-step goals for, every year that you should be reaching. So sometimes even just lighting initiatives, that's your biggest cost-saving measure, and electricity output. So sometimes even just as much as changing all your light bulbs in all your municipal buildings to LED really brings down the energy consumption.
That cool air we're feeling right now is part of the Cape Light Compact's contribution to the chillers for this very building, made this a doable project. We have a lot of experience with these folks. We should have a lot of confidence in them.
So do we need to vote on this, or what do you want to?
I guess you could vote to proceed with the application and the steps. It does sound like probably the biggest thing that would take time would just be the town meeting vote, but.
What happens if we decide to do this and town meeting doesn't accept the stretch code?
If they don't accept the stretch code, we wouldn't become a designated green community. This happened in Barnstable. They adopted all of the other 4 criteria and did not adopt the stretch code through town council, but they continued on with the other policies because they're still good policies for the town.
Right, but they would not be considered a green.
You would not get your grant funding, no.
So we don't get the 170,000.
Unfortunately not, no.
One sort of actionable item you could do is to vote to ask us to proceed with the baseline analysis, the Cape Light Compact and Rise Engineering.
Yeah, and
That's a heavy lift.
I'd rather get the ball personally, I would say get the ball rolling so that they can come back and,
Yes,
yeah.
that's the way to get going.
Somebody want to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we proceed with the application process.
That's specific enough.
Is that good? Do we have a
Second?
second? So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Leanne.
thank you for coming.
Next up, we're going to the Director of Planning and Economic Development, Ralph Fataco, for draft comments to the State Development of Housing and Community Development for Village Green 1.
Good evening. I'm Ralph Fataco, Director of Planning and Economic Development, and thank you for inviting me to discuss the comments that I provided to the board for a draft review to be forwarded to Sandwich Housing. Just a quick history of what went on. As you may recall, back in February, the Ruin Stinson Realty Group submitted an application to Sandwich Housing, to Mass Housing for a project eligibility letter of a project called Village Green. The project will be located off Route 130 on 7 acres right there near the mobile station. It is a 140-unit project with six buildings, 3-story buildings. I'm sorry, 144 units, 38 of the units will be affordable. It's primarily 1 bedroom, 12.5% are 3 bedrooms. So it's really a workforce housing affordable project. As you may recall, another letter came before this board to be presented to Sandwich Housing, and to the effect that at the time, the Ruin and Stinson Realty Group had owed the town of Sandwich a significant amount of money in back taxes. Those back taxes were made current on May 17th, and as a result, we received a call from Mass Housing to ask would we be submitting any letter to Mass Housing in relation to this project. A few weeks ago, myself and some other department heads got together, we reviewed the project, and the letter that's before you is a result of that project. I just want to remind the board that I had been before the board in November to discuss how the town is doing in our affordability, our SHI. It's our affordable housing inventory. Just to remind the board, we just completed a housing production plan, which was approved. Our last approved housing production plan was 2010. We have a new one. We have a new one in place. Our SHI has been hovering around 3.8 for more than 10 years. I'm proud to say that from 2018, we've been working with some very good developers. As you know, Terrapin Ridge, and as discussed here, the Wing School. When those 2 projects come online, especially the Wing School, our SHI number will be at 5.8%. Just a reminder to the board that we're 10%, if we have 10% affordability within the town, that's considered a safe harbor. So as we went through the application, we were respectful of the applicants and what they present to the town. I think we looked at it regionally and locally. I think that one of the big issues that this town, and particularly this Board of Selectmen, have been grappling with is wastewater. It's a significant project, not just the 144 units that's being presented this evening. This is really a 3-phase project. Phase 1 is the 144 units on the front end. If I could back up for one moment, the total parcel is approximately 63 acres. The front end is going to be 144 units. In the middle, 25 acres will be a solar project, and the the back portion of the property, which is along Peters Pond, is going to be a proposed 240 unit project. So in its totality, it represents a significant waste water inclusion into the watershed, which goes to Mashpee. So we're not saying that it can't be done. We just want the developers to be aware of it, and we have to work through it and work through DEP. The other things that we brought up was that as we reviewed the application, we just want to make sure we didn't see anything in the application that the primary members of the development team had done anything of this magnitude. So we just want to make everyone's life easier. We would like to have see that they hire 40B consultants. As I said, we had a very good experience with Terrapin Ridge, a very good experience with the Wing School, and I have to say, even with the smaller projects when we work with Habitat for Humanity, again, very good experiences with developers who understand the 40B legislation and really communicating, working effectively with towns. Again, I don't know if you remember the design of the building. It's extremely utilitarian. Our hope is to have a design that's more in line with the town of Sandwich. And again, this is not something we're just bringing up because that's what we want to see in the planning office or you, the selectmen. But just a reminder to this board that in 2019, we submitted for and received a Delta grant to do a housing study here in the town of Sandwich. And we did look at the South Sandwich Village area. We looked at this Village Green area. And again, we're looking at housing projects. They look at double-deckers and townhouses. But we understand that if we want to get rental housing, we have to think a little differently. But that doesn't mean we cannot have design projects that don't fit in with the nature of the neighborhood. Again, the density. I just want to point out to the board is, we're looking at 20 units per acre. So at 7 acres, we're kind of on target. Again, just a reminder to the board, that's a similar density what we're seeing at the Wing School. And just one of the final things we bring up is traffic. And most of 130 over there by Snake Pond really gets backed up. So we want to make sure that the developers are aware of this, and we want to work together if they do intend to move forward with this project. That these are, we do feel that these are legitimate issues to be brought up. That for mass housing to look at. Again, as I put in the draft memo, what we're looking for as we look with all our project is a development that's respectful to the town, respectful to the surrounding neighborhood, and ultimately respectful to the people who live in that development. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Ralph, I'd just like to, in reading this, it's an education piece as far as what's going to be required to develop that piece of property.
Yeah.
And I think you were very fair in letting the developers know, because I noticed there are a number of things that are not on their plans at this point that you addressed.
Yeah.
And made it very clear to them what the requirements are. That septic requirement of the gallonage is a huge issue, which was addressed. And I just want to thank you. I think it's a great letter. And I said it lays it all out there, and even in a helpful way to the potential developers of what they're going to have to go through to do that.
Yeah, and that is our intent. And I know if you saw in the housing production plan, it's we listed it as a goal to work cooperatively with developers, and we just again, it's our intent to spell these things out. So any developer, this developer, any future developer knows what we're looking for, and not just us. As we point out, and again, for the wastewater, we did work through Dave Mason, and any gallonage over 10,000 is a requirement. This is a requirement by DEP, so it's a state requirement, so just, you know, something that they're aware of. And then I did leave it blank, but I have to find out, but we, you know, an MOU was signed with the town of Mashpee. I know 40B allows you to get waivers from local bylaws and initiatives, but I don't think, I know it doesn't allow you for waivers from regional, and I think an MOU may be considered a regional, a regional edict. So I do believe, again, it's not something that's insurmountable, or we're using it as something to block the development. It's something, you know, we want the developer to be aware. You know, again, as people call our office all the time about it, you know, it's 63 acres in private hands. So it's going to become something. So we want it to become something, again, that we're all proud of and really serves the community well.
Good, man.
Ralph, this was a really thorough look at this, as Mike pointed out. And with regard to the traffic, I think you're spot on that. And something that popped into my head on that was the Cape Cod Commission has, they do small corridor studies with the transportation departments where they don't take a huge look at something. But it might be worth talking to Paul Tilton about this, because he represents us on that board, and get them to perhaps look at that section of Route 130 from Quaker Meeting House Road into Mashpee as a small corridor study. Because it would be, because if you had 380 some odd units approaching that road, you would need sequenced traffic lights, at least that, just to make it work.
I know I'm sorry for interrupting, Patch, but you could really go into the weeds with this, and I know on a discussion with Paul, he was thinking, man, he says, you definitely, you know, we really have to look into a left lane turning lane, and I mean, you know, it's like, you know, where do you stop? So I think
That's what I meant by comprehensive, because it's really,
Trying to put a turning lane, a third lane on that section with the trees where they are and all that stuff. Oh, my goodness.
if sidewalks both sides, we've really.
Ralph, when a developer's at this stage, just for everybody else's knowledge, for the, you know, people listening, you know, when they're going to do like 128 rental units in there, what is their projected timeline? Do they really have one? Like how far, like, you know, as far as permitting, like for a project of this size and scope and where it is, what would you expect as a timeline for them in order from today until handing people keys to the doors, assuming normal?
Oh, yeah, that's I could, you know, let's just talk about a permitting timeline, because, you know, the perfect example we have right now is the wing school, you know, and everything is working well and working smoothly and everyone works together. It's about 2+ years for permitting. Then it's construction and funding, then construction. I mean, conservatively speaking, from today to like when you could let somebody in, you're looking 5 to 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so, and that's with things going well.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you know, I hate to remind the board that we have had some comprehensive permits down on the books that, you know, we sit on that's been lingering for 10+ years, so.
And, you know, and
15 years and nothing, you know, so.
I asked that it was kind of a loaded question for me to say that, you know, the following thing is that, because I've gotten phone calls, and I'm sure other people have as well, is that this is not something they're breaking ground in the spring and going. This is the same as the wing school. It is a very long process. There's a lot of, you know, very detailed permits and studies that have to occur. Probably the most formidable one is the wastewater. You know, that's
right, and I think the projects that work well, that we've been involved in the past few years, that work well, that has a lot of really a community outreach. And we have seen that those projects work extremely well. And again, I pointed out these examples before, and I'll point them out again. At Terrapin Ridge, we had 2 people show up for a comprehensive permit. 2 people, you know, two people showed up. They just wanted to know what are the hours of construction, and the other one was, oh, it's a good project. And as you know, the wing school, you've all been the board that what we had to go through to get that past that town meeting, and the positive reaction we had to that. And as we went through the comprehensive permit for that, there was like no one. The people who showed up wanted to know how can I get my name on the list to get into the buildings. So and that's all a result of of outreach and listening to the neighboring communities and making them feel comfortable about the project that's going to be developed.
I had a question and a suggestion, maybe. If we agree to this letter, becomes a public document. It's being sent to a state agency, and developers, but it becomes a public document.
Actually, it is a public document. Well, the draft, it was part of the agenda, and just so you know, I did forward it prior to this meeting. I did forward it to Attorney Fitch for him to look at. So
I'm just wondering if it's a public document, and if you have somebody out there that wants to know how long a project is going to take and all that, read this. Because once you've read this document, you see what the hoops they got to jump through at all levels, and and you've explained it clearly, the conflicts and the concerns. I would just suggest that if it ever is public, they could just look it up and read it if they're worried about it, because it's not going to happen overnight for sure.
But if you're looking at flipping this kind of money, 7 years isn't a long time.
Right. So we would. How this sits right now is that we would need the board to vote to send the letter, and I would, in talking with Bud, that we would recommend that town council review the letter, prior to sending. So it would be, if somebody wants to make a motion on this, it would be a motion to send the letter pending approval by the town attorney.
Make a motion, we send the letter from the planner to, I guess, Mass Housing.
Regarding Village Green.
Regarding the Village Green concept.
Second?
Do you want to add just one thing that we add, that a post approval of town council?
Okay, with
Amend it to
the approval of town council.
Second.
motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Moving on to, thank you, Ralph.
thank you.
Moving on to old business, acquisition of 297 and 300 Miggs Backus Road, acceptance of deed and settlement statement.
So this is probably, of everything on the agenda, the most pressing. Our goal is to close on the acquisition of these two parcels by June 30th. Right now, town council is planning on closing with the other attorney next Tuesday, the 28th. It's not an exaggeration to say that over the last month, and it's been going for many months, I've probably seen more than 300 to 500 emails from Vicky Marsh and the other side, and because there's so many different groups involved with this, and so it's ready to go. So if the board wants to vote to accept the proposed deed and the settlement statement, I actually need to get your signatures. We'll overnight mail it tomorrow morning, and Bill's issuing the closing checks to town council. The checks need to be made out to two different parties, and then that goes in the mail. And I should just refresh everyone's memory. I should have looked up the exact amount. We're buying these two pieces. It's open space, contiguous with some other open space that the town of Barnstable's acquired for roughly, I think it was about $450,000 and $454,000, and working through the Compact of Conservation Trusts and Mark Robinson, who we've worked with many times. Mark was successful in getting a 50% state grant to offset the acquisition cost. So once we send the full amount, we'll get reimbursed half that, and that half payment will go back into the Community Preservation Act funds. So it's a great project, a great location, abuts other conservation land, and we got a grant to pay for half of it through the governor's office, and I think it was a clean drinking water grant that we received, and Barnstable got the same grant for their half, so it's a huge success. So we just need a vote to those two documents and then get them signed, and we'll get them out tomorrow.
Make a motion that we accept the recommended land development agreement and purchase and sales agreement on lots, what are the numbers here?
297 and 300.
297 and 300 Megs Backus Road in Sandwich.
Second.
Have a motion, a second, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Unanimous. Moving on to disposition of Deacon Eldridge House license agreement, closing documents, and land development agreement.
So you have in your file just an email from Attorney Marsh sort of outlining the process that we have been involved in. I can tell you everything is going exceptionally well. With the owners, we continue to work on the closing documents. The last things that we're putting together now are the easements that relate to the public walking access easement as well as the public easement to maintain the dam and town drainage area on this end of the property. So those two things are the last kind of pieces that we need to work on. Ralph today has been our sort of liaison and leader on the project, and I think we have those resolved and they'll be mapped within the next week. The owners have been working incredibly diligently, both with our historic preservation architect, Wendell Kelso, and with Paul Holtz, who is the state preservation architect, on their development plan. They have, I'm going to put a number of about 90% of the way through. They have one more revision to submit to the state, including the location of the septic. That has to be reviewed by the state archaeologist. And that's the piece, if you recall, we agreed that if there was a requirement for an archaeological survey that's part of that project, that post-closing, we would participate in funding part of that study. We don't know anything about that yet, but certainly the value of the archaeological assessment, if required, is the town's value. It is to the community's benefit to have that information. So all I can say is things are going as well as they can be. I know everyone's very eager to close on the project because they are involved in a production I think you're all aware of, and that is ongoing, and there are timeframes associated with that. Filming started on site today with a temporary license agreement, which took quite a bit of doing on both Bud's part, our attorney's part, and their attorney to get to a license agreement that allowed them to do some temporary filming. So we're really happy that we've been able to accommodate their very demanding schedule, but also to see that they're working incredibly diligently on a restoration plan that will invest hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in the town's property. And until we see that plan approved by Mass Historical, we can't proceed with the closing. So the value really is their acumen in the industry, their knowledge of historic preservation, their commitment to working with us and working with the state to develop a plan that will restore both the interior and exterior of that building to the standards of the state and the preservation restrictions that exist on both the interior and exterior of that property. So we all feel really good about what's going on, and a lot of work going on behind the scenes, literally.
There's the July 14th closing off then because of all these requirements?
That's still very, very possible. They were hoping for the 30th. That looks a little dubious since I don't have anything in your packet to approve.
Do you need an emotion from us or anything to, at this point? No, it's really just waiting to.
Continued support.
You got it, good.
I have one question. That easement we talked about, that would be looking at the pond, be to the left where the bench is, that general area?
Generally, yes.
Okay. Okay, good.
Anybody else?
Yep.
So that's the only easement. There's no easement to the right of the property.
There's a small easement up, right here, right up on this edge of the property, because that's where the dam ends, and we want to make sure we can maintain that.
We have a drain.
Yep. Yep.
Drain,
Yeah, there's a drain.
dam drain.
You guys good?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Moving on to the proposed First Amendment to the In Good Health Host Community Agreement for adult retail marijuana sales.
So I'll do my best to explain this and walk the board through it. And if I struggle, I'll just need to take my time. David Noble from In Good Health is here as well. I don't know if you want him to come up if there's any questions, but he and I have talked several times. So I should just say a couple names, so when I say them, you'll know who I'm speaking about. But Attorney Nicole Costanzo is KP Law's expert on marijuana issues, and so she's been working with us for quite a while on these type of matters. And so, as you know, the town meeting approved expanding the allowed use for both our town bylaw and our zoning bylaw to allow for adult recreational sale of marijuana at co-located facilities that already sell medical marijuana, of which In Good Health is our one provider in town. So Mr. Noble is going through the process through the state, which is quite lengthy, in order to get certified, I believe, by the Cannabis Control Commission, and then ultimately we'll come back, we'll have to amend his special permit with the Zoning Board of Appeals and the normal reviews that take place there. One of the things that's needed is if a host community is done for the adult use, the recreational use, that needs to be agreed to as well. So that's just a little bit of background. So what's before you, and I put it in front of your seats, there's a lot of red markings. So instead of doing a whole new host community agreement, the way Attorney Costanzo structured this is it's an amendment. And so you'll see that on the first draft that we received, I believe from In Good Health's attorney, it restated a lot of the things that were already in the host community agreement. And so where this is an amendment to that, we don't need to restate it. So it's not an exaggeration to say like you're looking at a 15, 16 page document that in the end will probably be, 6 pages. And it's also fair to say that most of these things in here are standard boilerplate type language. Mr. Noble has reviewed a lot of what town council proposed, and so he and I have probably talked 4 or 5 times over the last 2 weeks to try to get things to a place where we could come to the selectmen about this tonight. And it's fair to say at this point, there's a couple of details that would need to be filled in once we knew more about the hours of operation and things, or if it would stay the same as the medical, that would be easy to fill in. But there were really 3 outstanding issues that we had talked about that we wanted to get resolved, and Attorney Costanzo really felt it wasn't worth her doing another draft of the document because these are more policy decisions, and if the board's okay with what I go through, then she would be able to redraft this quickly, get it to In Good Health's attorney. My guess is they would both agree on it, and it could probably be ready for signing, within a week if the board's comfortable with these 2 or 3 things that I'm going to go over. So anything that was sort of in question, I highlighted in blue, and I'll just go through an order in which ease to address. So on the bottom of page 5, we had proposed a paragraph that would deal with In Good Health covering any town legal costs associated with preparing this document. It's fair to say after we've talked it over back and forth, I would agree. I would recommend we just delete that paragraph. The costs that we've incurred are not very substantial, and the board is already aware that we're receiving a 3% impact fee payment on the medical marijuana uses. And similar to what Chief Wax said at town meeting, similar to what our other departments have stated, we really have not seen any large impacts on the part of town services for this operation. And so in round numbers, Mr. Noble's business is paying about $20,000 a quarter right now for the 3% impact fee on the medical marijuana. So in a sense, we're receiving funds that could be used to cover these legal costs. So I would recommend we delete that paragraph. On page, just a second, on page 11, when Attorney Costanzo drafted this, because she represents so many different communities that have recreational marijuana facilities, there's a couple of, in her words, like bellwether topics that seem to come up as issues. One is odor control. So she proposed a paragraph on that at the bottom of page 10 onto the top of page 11. And then just halfway down on page 11, paragraph E, traffic mitigation. And so this is the language that she proposed. I think it's fair to say that Mr. Noble agrees that he has to go through the ZBA process. If there's traffic requirements there, those have to be met. Most likely, if you think of the volume traffic that goes past the facility on Route 130 just off exit 2 to the south, the amount of cars that this business would add are probably very, very, very small compared to the total number. And so in our discussions back and forth, meeting with Mr. Noble and myself, I think it would be wise if we added some sort of language that if traffic problems and concerns arose after commencing the retail use, that In Good Health would participate with the town and the other business owners in the immediate vicinity to address those concerns. My guess is there's not going to be any different concerns than exist today, but if they do, he said that they would be willing to participate in trying to come up with a solution. And as you know, the location this is at, the property to the left, has several doctor's offices, dentist offices, so there's a lot of in and out traffic in that area. So I think we wouldn't delete paragraph E, just Attorney Costanzo would redraft it basically saying if problems existed after retail sales became operational, that In Good Health would would work with the town on addressing any traffic concerns.
But this is an amendment to the existing agreement.
Yeah.
They don't, because it's in a separate second business, do they have to go before the boards again?
I think they'd have to go before the ZBA because I'm not sure. It's an expansion of Ralph just left. Brendan might know. It is. It's an expansion of a different use. So I think they would have to get, I'm not saying they'll have to get a new traffic plan or anything, or traffic study, but because they had one before, but they will, I think, need to expand their special permit with the ZBA, I believe. So I think all those are pretty straightforward. The more meaty discussion, and I'm going to do my best on this part, is on it starts at the bottom of page 3, and it deals with the community impact fee. So Mr. Noble and I have been very blunt with each other, representing our interests. And so community impact fees are quite standard with host community agreements. And it's fair to say that I think most communities have found that the impacts haven't been as high as anticipated. And so one of the requirements that we have to do through the business is they have to report to the Cannabis Control Commission once a year, like what the impacts have been on the town. So I provided Mr. Noble an email probably 4 months ago after consulting with the department heads that we're really not having any financial impacts as a result of the operation. And so I think what's happened industry-wide, there's been movement to try to change the law and sort of take away the legality of towns being able to charge impact fees when there isn't an impact. So right now, the law still exists that we can have this in our host community agreement if both sides agree. Attorney Costanzo said there are 2 or 3 bills before the legislature right now that are being considered that are still probably a couple years away from being formally adopted, but that would basically do away with community impact fees. And so she said, if you add something like this and the law changes, is it legal? And so obviously Mr. Noble understands the business and what's going on out there. And so he and I have had a lot of discussions back and forth, and I'd encourage him, if I'm misstating anything, I believe there's an agreement to include the same 3% community impact fee for recreational sales that we currently have for medical sales, but that if the law changes, and this is where we'd have to work on language, he would be willing, because we have to honor the law, and Attorney Costanzo, in my conversations with her, you know, I'm paraphrasing, but if towns are being accused of trying to get blood money from a business to allow them to come in, and then that ability to do that is taken away, how can you keep charging it? So he agreed that there would be some sort of programs that he and I, or whoever's in my shoes and whoever's in his shoes, could work out in terms of actual programs that they would fund rather than an impact fee. And so I think that's probably where it'd be nice to get some board input on how we could do the language. If the law doesn't change, and these are only valid for 5 years anyway, impact fees, If nothing gets adopted in 5 years, there's an agreement to do the 3% for the 5 years. And I want to stress too, this is separate than the tax. So there's a separate tax for recreational sales that recreational providers have to submit to the state. I think it's 20%, and then 3% of the 20 gets sent back from the state directly to the town. That's set in stone. That doesn't go away. That has nothing to do with these community impact fees.
So is this a second business, or is it all one for just 3%?
Yeah, if he could come up and explain the business.
Dave's here, so. That's Dave Noble. Yeah. Come on down the hot seat, Dave.
David Noble, I'm representing In Good Health. Thank you for having me tonight. Oh, yeah, it would be one business. It's going to be a one co-located business. We're actually, I've been through the zoning process in other communities. There's actually no change of use to the business. It's just a change of who's allowed to come in, medical versus 21 plus. But I did meet with Ralph, and I did explain however the zoning board wants to proceed. You just tell me. But I have experience. I've seen what other communities have done. So I'm just waiting for Ralph to tell me how he'd like to proceed. But it's one co-located business.
One of my concerns is, one of the bases of selling this was the 3% to the towns.
Right.
You know, and that made it easier for it to go through, and to take it, if the state takes it away.
What, in real dollars, for somebody sitting at home watching this that voted on it, because the projections, I think, from the representative that was at town meeting was like 750. That was the projected. So if the state voted that through and the 3% went away, what is that? How much does that impact what the towns that cut us in half?
Not half, probably a third. But as I've had my conversations with Bud, we're willing to, in good faith, participate in programs that you'd like to see funded from our business. So, you can look and see that there's been some businesses who have sued their communities to remove host fees. That's happened in 4 towns, I believe. That's not my intention. I don't do that. That's not our practice. But if it does go away in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, the Massachusetts court system did that. We didn't have anything to do with that. But like I said to Bud, we're happy to participate in programs that you might feel are necessary to be a good business partner in the community. Well, we hope our business continues to succeed and do well so that we can continue to fund more programs if that day ever comes. But for now, it's a 3% of our gross revenue goes back to the community, and you guys get to put it in general fund and use it how you want to.
Let me just read what I sent Attorney Costanzo after Dave and I spoke a couple times. So I just said for this section, and again, I was just trying to get her the concept. I said, In Good Health agrees to honor the 3% impact fee for retail and medical sales for the term of the host community agreement. In the event the state laws change to limit or remove community impact fees, In Good Health and the town will revisit the issue to determine what other financial resources could be provided for specific programs and services as determined by the Chief Executive Officer of In Good Health and the town manager. And some examples that we talked about, could be a school resource officer or officers, direct payments to a program at the library or through the rec department, on, substance abuse issues. Just about anything I think we could come up with. I think that could go a long way.
But that would be voluntary.
But that would be right, and that's what Nicole wanted to
He's
stress.
gone and you're gone.
Yeah, no, it would say it here, but
Can you codify it some way?
yeah, I wonder. I don't know. It may. Maybe that's what Attorney Costanzo could help us with In Good Health's attorney to try to come up with something that would almost make it mandatory for some type of programs to be funded. I don't think you want to specify a dollar amount because, as David was saying, what if they do really well? It could be more than whatever we put here, or vice versa. Could be the other way.
So the other thing, I guess, and I'll use our neighbors to the south, Mashpee, as an example. I know, I'm hoping that everybody's successful and you do better than them, but they were banking on, I believe, $700,000 to $1 million. Then at the end of the year, they wound up getting like 180, which was significantly less. They were fortunate that the town manager didn't put that, anticipated windfall on the books, and then when it came in, significantly less. And then if you're talking, losing a third of that, then you're down to like $120,000, which is still something. I'm not saying that, but, my concern is that, from where we were at town meeting at 750, then it's going to come down to like 500 or whatever. What, in trying to quantify that 3% loss or the participation, what, I know it's difficult to put a number to it or whatever, but how do you envision in good health trying to make up that 3%? And then what is your anticipation? You still feel confident in the 750 number, or what?
I'm very confident in my 750 number, and I'll tell you why. If you look at what happened in Mashpee, they had to go through 900 hoops to get open, including building another building to put recreation. They got the worst start they ever possibly could have got to get into recreational marijuana. So, if any company like that was put in a situation with delays and hoops and hurdles, and you still have to go through a state process, and you don't get out the gate running, they still did a lot of revenue, and they still contributed $147,000. They missed half the summer, I think. I mean, I think you can read a little more about it, because I think there's been a couple articles about it, but they didn't actually get helped in the process to, give as much as they could to the community.
One of the concerns was they interviewed that owner in the paper, and he didn't say it necessarily would improve.
I could tell you he's not thrilled with me today. I've taken the majority of his medical business already, and we have an unbelievable location. We have a company that's been open for almost 8 years now, a very successful brand, and we think we're going to do extremely well, and we're happy to, keep giving back the town of Sandwich what we think we're going to do. I can't really estimate what I think, but based on what I've done in Brockton and the competition that came and the amount of money I still contribute to that community, we're not going to face those competitions down here just because it's geographically located so much different than being in a city. So, we're pretty optimistic that you'll be happy in a year with the contributions we're making to the community.
And because you brought it up, what are the contributions that you currently make to Brockton, just as a comparison?
So I believe in 2021, between host agreement and taxes, was about 1.3, 1.4 million, with a tremendous amount of competition that reduced our revenue in Brockton. So,
Was that recreational and medical, or just medical?
those both combined. So I know my business isn't going to be half of what I do there. It's going to be more than that. So that's why I told you the 750 is a pretty comfortable number that we think we're going to be able to produce.
And then I guess my other question is, as I drive around the Cape, especially down, on the outer Cape, there seems to be a more abundance of dispensaries that are popping up. Do you foresee that, is this something like it's, this, like next year it'll be 750, then 700, and as it gets more diluted in the marketplace based on what you're seeing in other communities, or is it?
I don't think down here, because we're in a unique area, right? When we get over the bridge, there's no one over the bridge except for us, then Mashpee, then you make your way down the Cape, and it's pretty far in between exits. So we have that advantage. The only disadvantage over time is prices come down, and then obviously we all make less because of that. But no, I don't think so. I would anticipate for the first several years that you're going to see a ramp up, and then maybe level out. Now, 10 years from now, I can't comment on that, but for the next 2 to 3 years, I see a ramp up taking place. No, right now we're projected that we could open sometime October, November, and then we'd be open, get through the winter, spring, and then have a great summer, and off we go. We'll be on all cylinders at
That's
that
really
point.
the anticipation as far as timing for permits and approval from the commission.
We're doing no construction. It's not required. We're already operational, so I just have to go through the local process and then a provisional license and a final license. There's no architectural review. They've already approved that. So, we're in a better position than somebody building one today. But we're still looking at 4 to 6 months to get open.
Is most of that 4 to 6 months at the state level, or is it mostly?
No, state level. Once we have a host agreement, Monday, my community outreach meeting, I can finish my provisional license and then go back to zoning, see what they want me to do, get that done in between the license and the final license, and then it's about 2 months in between each license that we apply for with the state.
I think you're in a great location. If you were going to go by it and you're coming off the Mid-Cape, you got to go by Sandwich before you go to Mashpee, so where are you going to go? You're going to go to Sandwich. If you're coming up, from Lower Cape, easiest way to get to Mashpee, 130, you're going to go by Sandwich.
Yep.
I think when we started this whole thing, you stood by your word. I mean, I visited your place up in Brockton. I was impressed with that. So I think I think you're in a good position. We have places in town, hospitals, whatever, and they don't pay any taxes, and we have payment in lieu of taxes, and we do quite well with them. So if the state does, drop to 3%, I mean, payment in lieu of taxes, it's still an avenue. So I think we'll do pretty well with him. He's been truthful all the way along, so hopefully you stay the same. Good.
Bud and I have a pretty good relationship now, so I said to Bud, a lot of this, you got to trust me a little bit that I'll do the right thing if something does happen, but we don't foresee that change if it does happen for several years, so.
So he needs the host agreement to go forward.
Yep.
This host agreement is going to contain the same 3%.
Exactly.
Is it possible that if in fact the state removes it, we could
I
put
mean,
an amendment?
Maybe that's what we could say is that if if impact fees are declared invalid, then we would get together to specify what programs would be funded.
And then we could codify that into an amendment of some sort to the host agreement?
I would think so. And I
No
think
problem. Like I
Nicole
said,
and-
we're willing to participate in programs you want, so whatever's legal, whatever Nicole and our council find to be a legally binding agreement that we can do, I have no issue with that.
So you don't really need anything from us?
Well, if that concept was okay with you, I'd sort of charge her with putting it together, and then hopefully Dave and I could step back and they can figure out the details, and then, all the rest of the stuff in here is really boilerplate, and I think it protects both sides, so if it was good to go, depending how comfortable with you, I could just put it in your sign folder, instead of bringing it back in 2 weeks, because hopefully it'd be done by then, so.
I guess we
Well,
need
I'll try to draft it so that if the law changes, we would get back together and maybe just say to talk about financial issues only, not to reopen the whole thing. Just to- Yeah,
No problem.
okay.
Thank you.
Need a motion on it?
I don't know,
Yeah.
it wouldn't hurt, it's that way if you guys decided to sign it in between.
So you'd need a motion to proceed forward with council with the amendment that we would revisit if the removal of the 3.
Yeah.
Or just, whatever, I don't know.
If the impact fees are declared are legally invalid, then we would sit back down to determine what financial,
So just say
programs could be
impact
funded.
fee review.
Yeah.
There you go. Make a motion as presented. That covers it. That covers it. Okay?
I just think you gotta have a qualifier in it that,
Yeah.
because we're not gonna vote, we're not gonna see it finished, we're taking your word for it, and we're gonna sign it, right?
If that's what you want, yeah.
We're going to see the agreement anyway.
Pending legal
Yeah.
counsel's review.
Right.
So I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second, Bobby made the motion.
Yep.
Second?
Bud said.
Any discussion?
Yeah, we're not going to be working in the blind, we're going to.
Yeah,
If
yep.
you don't want to sign it,
100%.
that's another discussion.
Right.
Okay.
And when they come up with the final language on that one section, I'll be sure I'll forward that to you all so you don't.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? You're not? Okay. We're unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go over the selectmen meeting schedule.
This was more just because summer's coming, and I know there's vacation plans all around, but I just wanted to remind the board what the current schedule was. As you always know, we can always cancel or call a meeting with 48 hours' notice, so. But I just wanted to put that in there because it's that time of year. I think we had down July 7th if needed, and I think, do we have that down? Or just said, or a holiday, but where we're not meeting next week, and it's, 3 days after the 4th, I just figured we'd meet, so.
Anybody have any? Okay. Other matters not reasonably anticipated by the chairman?
The disabled parking space outside,
Yep.
where are we?
Yeah, engineering and DPW came up with 4 concepts, and I think we're gonna go ahead with the first one, which was the simplest, just as to get it done quicker, is basically just the first spot that's out there closest to the building, closest to the front of the building would be properly painted and marked, and that would suffice. I know when we got the work done on Town Hall, it is acceptable to put the lift that comes down from a chair onto a sidewalk. As you know, it's really tight out there. Just the 3 other concepts, one was to cut out the island and to put a spot over there, which, I don't know, that could cause more problems than it helps. And then you could look at the one technically on 130 because when this was designed, in fact, it won the award for the best accessible adaptation of a historic building when McGinley Household did the work, but the slopes on the crosswalks coming over from sort of parking in front of the flagpole, coming this way meet, and someone in a chair could roll into the front of the building, the front door at the right slopes, which would be, but still, getting out on 130, that doesn't seem like the safest thing. And then the other one would be sort of back a little bit from the first slot, push it out further into the road, stripe it, mark it, but it would narrow down the 2 lanes between the square and where that pushed out space would be. Now, I suppose if no one's parking there, then people can get by as normal, but that's something I think we want to look at closer, and maybe that's a better, more comprehensive solution, but we figured do the quick one first and then look at that one. And I know Brendan's given us some advice on which one he thinks would be best in the long run. So I couldn't tell you like when it's going to be painted, when it's going to be done. I just haven't asked DPW, but they've been involved in all these conversations.
And the penalties for any violations, that there is an account, right, that accumulates those penalties?
Yeah, I don't know if it had been set up. We think it was closed because we haven't had any activity in a while, and so Bill checked and with the accounting office, so there's not one now, and so Taylor White, the town clerk who gets all the parking tickets, estimated there's less than 4 of those we get a year. So the next one that comes in, they've already come up with what they want to, how they want to number it, and then that would set up that account. But until a ticket comes in, so it's going to be set up, but it doesn't exist right now.
Yep.
I think it was there many years ago and probably wasn't used, so it just got closed out.
Okay. And then to digress just a bit, the new boardwalk, it's the part of the purpose of it is to be ADA compliant and accessible and et cetera, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else? Okay, moving on. Authorization award contract for the Sandwich Hollows Golf Club irrigation system and corresponding bond strategy.
All right, so one part of this is straightforward and the other is probably a little more interesting and more discussion. So the easy thing is the charter allows me to award any bids up to $1 million. So this is more, so it requires a board vote. So the recommended low bidder for the Sandwich Hollows Golf Course irrigation improvements is NMP Golf Construction of Williston, Vermont, for the bid amount of $2,047,000. That includes the base bid plus both alternates. The bid price was excellent considering what's happened in the construction world and what our initial estimates were, which were around $2 million. If you look at the one-page summary that's in your packet, the next highest one was about 2.3, and the one above that was like 2.9. So we did really well for getting that, and so recommend that you award that bid and allow me to sign the contract.
Somebody want to make a motion?
Just wanted to get the name.
It's NMP Golf Construction.
A movie award the bid to NMP Golf Construction of Williston, Vermont.
Second.
Bid amount of $2,047,000.
Second.
Your first and a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Excuse me. The bid price is what?
$2,047,000. That includes both alternates.
Got it. Thank you. Yep. Okay. Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
So now probably the more interesting thing, and I'll try to keep this brief. So Bill's our financial expert. There's a really interesting email he sent Heather and I over the weekend when he was obsessing about the numbers, but just talking about the economy and the Federal Reserve's projected things that I don't understand at all. And so what's interesting is, as you know, we talked at town meeting because we knew rates would be going up. We're trying to get this issued as soon as we could. At the same time, with the $13 million for the school work. And then we had a couple of smaller carryovers on some other projects that we were looking at doing as well. So we have our bond rating call next week with Standard & Poor's, which the usual suspects will be in on, and we'll be answering those questions. But when it comes time to how much should we borrow of the $3.5 million that's been authorized by the golf course, I'll turn it over to Bill in a second, but I think after much discussion, and he's spoken with a lot of our financial advisors, and then internally, Heather, Bill, and I have met multiple times. I think our recommendation is to right now bond $2.5 million of the 3.5 that was authorized. If you remember, we've always been a little bit nervous, especially the golf department staff, about being able to make those annual payments. So obviously, if we borrow less, the payments are less. It doesn't take our authority to bond the other amount or ban the other amount later and get the equipment we need. You know, one of our collective thoughts is if we have another good year, which it looks like we will know in a couple months how this past fiscal year was. Last fiscal year was the best one we've ever had. You know, we may have enough principal in there, or there may be some smaller pieces of equipment we could fund through the normal capital budget, not through golf, and that would hold down the need that we have to take money from the bond authorization. So in a perfect world, if we could find a way to carry those other costs over time, theoretically, you could go back to town meeting 5 years from now and rescind that $1 million authorization, so the department is paying less than we originally thought. But as you guys know, the rates have gone up substantially. So what we would have to pay if we borrowed the same 3.5 is about $50,000 more per year than what we anticipated at town meeting. Now, we have the full authority to do it. We could just go ahead and do it, do all the work, buy all the equipment once the work's done, and then our costs would be extra, so it just makes it tighter. And the other part, we can't give you any real details on because it's so confusing and we just heard on it. It's fair to say that the solar projects that we've been waiting on for years from the state, they've indicated to us for the first time ever, Eversource may be looking at charging towns for the cost for some of the installation and utility costs for connections. So it's going to limit, if you have to give out a lot of money in the beginning to get these things accomplished, the price that they gave us initially on the golf department, because if you think of where it is, basically in the woods, far away from everything, it would offset a lot of the benefits we were going to get from the solar canopy above the parking lot. So we're not as sure about, we're sure about what we'd get annually when it was up, but if we have to upfront $600,000 for them to run the connections there, you know, I think we should look long and hard before we do that. So again, that's just another thing that makes us a little bit nervous about coming up with the full amount, which is why we think $2.5 million makes the most sense for the golf.
is there a chance to phase the construction so that you could spread it out over a longer period and use more cash?
I think the irrigation's not going to take all that long, but the other stuff we had was more a backup well, which we think is important. So that was the difference between the 2 and the 2.5. But the other stuff was more like types of maintenance equipment. There's actually in your packet a list. A structure to house these things in. Some of those things we could probably wait a little bit on, or fund through our regular capital budget, which might be the most prudent way to go. And I stole all of Bill's thunder with all the fancy numbers that he does in his in his spreadsheets.
So I think, when we were getting ready for town meeting and we were presenting the golf course, the capital project for the golf course, we've had two major, I guess, hurdles come up. One is the solar that Bud just came on, and what we're seeing in the economy as a whole. The Federal Reserve has made substantial rate increases that are just almost unprecedented, to be honest with you. Since town meeting, the Fed has moved the interest rates up 125 basis points. It's unforeseen. It was completely unpredictable when we were going through this. And I think when we were talking about the golf course project, we talked about being flexible and being conservative. And I think this is us having to pull back already because of factors outside of our control. And I think by cutting down the bond, instead of offering the full 3.5, we can offer the 2.5. And if, we still have that $1 million that we could authorize down the road. And I think that's an option we would keep out there. But as Bud mentioned, we may get to the point where we just have to rescind that authorization. And instead of having this being a $3.5 million project, it's now a $2.5 million project, and we're going to have to make do with that. These rate, the economy, the inflation is spiraling out of control, like we've all seen, and this is how the Federal Reserve fights inflation, is by raising these rates. We are moving at lightning speed trying to get this bond issued. We're going to be selling it in the middle of July, and we'll be back here on July 21st to get it signed. The Fed is meeting July 26th and 27th, I believe it is, where it's expected they're going to raise rates yet again. So we want to get this sold as fast as we can, and that's why we're moving as fast as we can, because obviously the school piece is the major part of this bond that's coming up. But just between the solar and the interest rates here, I think it's time to be conservative on this project and only issue the 2.5 as opposed to the 3.5.
Our original estimates included money from the solar, correct?
Yeah, about $55,000 a year.
And the savings on the not spending the 3.
We've estimated it to be about $35,000 a year.
Yeah.
So we'll probably be paying about $190,000 a year instead of our initial estimate, which was about $225,000. But that's just, it's all a guess game on what interest rates we get. And the interest rate that I use for the spreadsheet in your packets, Bill talked to the bond advisors today, and they think it'll be less than that, which is great because that'll be more savings. But I mean, until we go out to bond, though, you never know.
And like we've talked about, when you issue debt, we're always based on projections because you don't know the rate you're getting till literally the day you sell it. Right now, I had a long meeting this afternoon with our financial advisor. They thought we might get around 4, but the times that we're seeing right now are truly unprecedented. The inverted yield curve, not to bore you, but that's a sign of recession that's out there right now. The war in Russia and Ukraine, there's a lot of mitigating factors that are predicting this stuff very difficult. But
that sheet you gave us, is a guesstimate by the federal government showing that maybe by 24, the rates will either stabilize or drop?
Yeah, so that in that email, not to bore you with some economic jargon, but that's what's called a dot plot. And what they do is they take the opinion of the Federal Reserve Board and they kind of just give their opinion as to where they think rates are going. And what that plot right now is telling us that they think rates are going to go higher and higher. The one issue that you're going to have is generally if we do enter into recession, which I think we're probably headed to, I think late this fall, winter, generally how the Federal Reserve fights recession is they lower rates. So they're going to be in a tough, it's going to be a conundrum is, you're raising rates right now to fight the inflation, but if you get into recession, you generally reduce rates to help get out of the recession. So I think these are challenging, unprecedented times that we're headed into. It's tough out there right now.
And
It's
I should
tough out
say,
there.
we've been in an unbelievable rate window for quite a while now. And if you look at some of our old debt, I mean, there were interest rates similar to what we're talking about here. So it's not unprecedented. It's just, we've gotten used to some great rates for a while, and now it looks like it's going to go up.
If you go back to when we built the marina, the Harbor Master building, we sold that for under 2%, which is essentially free money.
Yes.
And we got, to Bud's point, we did get spoiled a little bit.
But when we planned this all out, you had a figure per household and all that.
Yeah.
The taxes would be to pay for this bond. I think you're worried about, we'd have to there'd be more taxes involved.
It would be.
If we went after the whole thing. But $50,000 isn't a huge amount spread over.
No, and it's really minimal in terms of the impact, I would say, on the. Plus, remember, we were trying to pay for this from the golf revenue, so there should be no impact on the taxpayer. We did have those two safety nets, one being when we retire the debt on the golf land, which is 3031 is the first year that's gone. That's about $400 to $425 a year, and then also the money that we've been setting aside on the short-term rental taxes, the rooms taxes for 50% of that can be used for debt purposes. So we've been setting that aside, but that just started. So, we have plenty of safety, and so I'm not worried about that. I'm more worried about the golf department paying for this now that the rates have gone up. And if we borrowed the full amount, it'd be even more of a burden. And it looks like what we thought was black and white with the solar revenue might not be as positive as we initially thought. And I want to stress, and I know Heather would, we just got some of these very, very confusing correspondence from Eversource. So who's to say what it will be in the end? But it's the first time we've seen charges back to the communities to install these things.
Defeats the purpose.
Right. Well, then that ties into.
The school was roughly just under 200,000. The golf course was over 6.
We ran into that on our affordable housing project recently with the electrical service for it, specifically, which they had previously done that work gratis and then wanted to be paid.
There's ways, maybe the state will pick up some of that. Maybe they'll find other ways too, but it's too uncertain, I think, to put more of a burden on the golf course revenue. So we're just trying to be as safe as possible. And I honestly think on those other things on that list, there's things we can accomplish through our normal budget process, especially if they have good years, that safer.
And I think for the project, the main point of the project was to get that irrigation system fixed, and this will still allow us to do that. But again, I think we need to be conservative here, and, we talked about being flexible, and this came up a lot sooner than we had ever imagined.
So you don't need anything from us?
No, we just wanted to tell you, so if you're good with the 2.5, that's what we'll include. We'll explain before we, go out to bond, and Bill will be in for you guys to sign an hour worth of paperwork one night in late July to do that. But the big issues are the 13 million for the school. If this was 2.5, if you remember, there's 500,000 left on the Center for Active Living. And then there was a question about the wing school, which was like 2.65 million, which in light of, them probably being delayed a little bit, maybe we don't borrow that now and just hold off and wait. So that's what we're thinking.
Just out of interest, when's the school issue going to be dealt with, the 13 million?
So right now, we're in the middle of going through what they call legal requirements. So we got 16 pages worth of legal requirements from bond counsel that we've been working with on the last 2 weeks. And they have questions about all the projects that Bud mentioned. But we should be ready. We should be selling it in mid-July. And then on the July 21st meeting, we'll be here to sign away.
So your goal is to beat the Fed on the.
We've been racing to do that. You know, our fear is that if we don't get everything done by the middle of July, you know, the Fed went up 75 basis points, which was, I mean, I believe it was the first time in 40, I think it was 44 years, I believe, something along those lines, that they had done that. No one was really expecting them to go over 50. You know, the fear is as inflation hasn't slowed, would they go another 50, 20, you know, I mean, generally they go 25, you know, I mean, to go up 125 basis points since the middle of May is, it's unfathomable, you know, and yet that's where we are. So,
Imagine somebody making money on money, though, because if you said to somebody like 3 months ago, hey, we can sign you up for 12 million for 4, you'd be like all day long.
yeah,
Now, I mean, my first house in 1981 was 16.5%.
yeah, oh, no, absolutely, you know, but it's, you know, what's hard is, you know, as you know, when you go through the budget process with town meeting and these projects, I mean, you know, we're putting these projections together 6-8 months before it happens, you know, and so at the time we were using great projections, and we're always conservative. We're always adding basis points on top of what we actually think to be on the safe side, you know. Here is that, you know, the economy's not doing well, you know, to be blunt, and you know, and so when you see the Fed raising the rates the way they are, no one could have predicted that. You know,
I think we were
It's
when we
off
did
the
Oak
chart.
Ridge and Forestdale, we were happy to get 6.
I think we were that high, yeah.
That was 91 or 2.
yeah. I mean, you know, if we could borrow money at 4%, like you said, it's not expensive, you know, but it's more than we thought we were going to be paying.
Compared to
You know,
zero.
just a couple months ago.
Zero.
Yeah, just a couple months ago. You know, I mean, if we had sold this in, you know, April instead of July, we probably wouldn't be having this discussion, to be honest with you. But now, unfortunately, like what's happened in the economy is forcing us to have this conversation.
We didn't have the authority to, just so the public,
Yeah, no,
we weren't able to
no,
do that.
No, absolutely, yeah. You know, so it's, you know, unfortunately, timing is everything, you know, and the solar, I mean, if solar is going to become that expensive, I mean, who knows when that's going to be able to come down the road, you know? Right. Thank you.
Bill dreams of basis points like I dream of buffalo wings.
All right, thank you.
Bill, thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, next up is the Board of Selectmen liaison assignments. We have a few vacancies.
And I would encourage, so mea culpa, Melissa, Heather and I searched all over through our computers, Kathy's computer, to try to find the old list. So we actually had to go back like 3 years to find the list of committee liaisons, meaning like what committees, and for all we know, you guys may have added some in the last few years. We just couldn't find Kathy's old documents. So we do remember who was assigned to each thing, but we didn't at the time. But it's completely up to you guys on what you want to do.
Do you want to just go through the list and see if anybody raises their hand?
Can you just ask Charlie wants to keep his, or?
Charlie, you good?
We could do it that way. I'm good with those two.
Okay. And Bobby, are you good with the 3 that you got?
Yep.
Mike, you good with the,
I'll take the wastewater issue if that's vacant.
okay. So we'll put Mike down for wastewater. The next one up will be the golf advisory. Does anybody want to do the golf advisory? Yeah, golf.
Patrick, you play golf? You a golf guy?
No, I've done that already.
I'll do it.
Okay, Mike's taking the golf.
Yeah, just say you don't have to do these if you don't want to.
No, I
You don't have to
We
have
should assign
someone
it, though.
if you don't, whatever.
MMR Senior Management Board,
What is that?
that's the mass military.
Oh, yeah.
Bobby, you want that?
Bobby, you
Some meetings we go to, Bud, and stuff.
Those are different. I'll have to find out. Like,
Okay.
I'm on the MC3 and one other one, but I think these are occasionally they'll have them with just the town reps, so
Okay.
I'll check on that. Yep.
If you want, I'll take the Winter Road Maintenance Appeal Committee. Not that that ever. And then the last one's Upper Cape Tech. Any,
Yeah, you know, not that I need something else to do,
No,
but
I-
I thought I was on that. We were doing it together or something?
No, they never got back to us. They needed somebody.
Oh, okay.
It was that state list or whatever.
Yes,
What do you want
yes.
to take? You want to take that? You want to take one? No?
No, we should,
You don't want to take one?
Patrick got shut out.
No, I'm actually going to try.
We can fix that.
I want to try to get the MPO position again.
Yeah.
And that's the MPO position is a position that includes a select board member from the Upper Cape towns, Falmouth, Bourne, Sandwich, and Mashpee. So I'll come back to you with that. That is an election.
That rotates, right?
That's
Yeah.
an election.
Yes. But that would be my strongest interest.
They advertised it, Patrick, I think.
Yeah, I wanna
Yeah,
say
we
it was-
saw it.
Yeah,
No,
I'll get with the commission on it, 'cause they do.
I'll do Upper Cape Tax.
Mike said you
Shane,
Yes,
I'll do Upper Cape.
okay, yeah.
That takes care of it.
Okay, and then the next one that we're moving on, if everybody's good, we'll move on to is the annual board and committee appointments. And there's a bottle of Advil for everybody. We have to sign all of them, right? And if there, so is the better way to do this, if anybody has any objections, or is there?
Yeah, there's a list, like, so we have the town clerk's office has a new computerized system, so that's what this was generated from, and before it was printed out, Melissa and Taylor went through everything to make sure it was accurate.
So this is what those are, we sign.
Yeah,
So do you want this as a motion? Is that how you?
yeah, the slate, I guess, if you're willing to do it.
Is there any objections to anybody on the list?
I have none. I'll say it that way. I did read it, and I don't have any objections.
I went through.
Make a motion, we accept the appointments as printed.
And could you add Heather to the local emergency planning committee too?
Sure.
I know she's on it, and I don't see her name there.
Maybe they voted her off.
Please.
All right, so do you want to make an amendment, Mike, to your motion to add?
Well, Heather, what were you going on to, the? Local Emergency Planning Committee. We'll add Heather to the list as amended.
Do I have a second?
See, Heather, no one wants you on it.
I'll still second that. Sorry, Heather.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And it's unanimous.
Did we need a motion on the liaison assignments as well?
I think that's just your consensus.
Okay, that's just our
Yeah.
consent, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Brendan, you're back in as the fence viewer. I never saw that one before. Okay. Moving on, to recommend new board and committee appointments. As listed, I'll read them off. The Historic District Committee, Lisa Hassler; Sandwich Cultural Council, Carol Cotis; the Zoning Board of Appeals, Mary Foley and Bob Jensen as the alternate; the Golf Advisory Committee, Kevin Ducey and John Hurley as the full member, John Hurley; the Sandwich Historical Commission, Mary Lynch is a full member, and June Murphy is the alternate. I believe that.
You want to move that as a slate?
Yeah, I think
Yeah, probably, unless anybody has any objections.
No, I would move the slate of recommended committee appointments as printed in the agenda for June 23rd.
second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous? Moving on to,
Should say, like,
Yeah.
Bob Jensen's been on the ZBA for, wow, 20, 30 years, and, like, is an incredible member, and I think he's just stepping back to alternate, but there was a lot of zinging of his fellow members, which was pretty funny, about his pay being reduced, which, of course, he doesn't get any, but it was good.
Moving on to the next thing is our second public forum. Does anybody have a comment for the second?
Is there any way to get a liaison to the Commission on Disabilities? Could you maybe talk about that at some point?
She's asking if there's a way to get a liaison to the Commission with Disabilities.
Let me say it this way. I've been attending the Zoom meetings, so
I know that, I can't think of his name right now because it's too late. The person I think that was in Heather's position used to come, Doug Lapp. So he had always been there, and we haven't had anyone since he left. And it came up in our meeting that and Charlie's been coming, so it's been great. But it would be awesome to have the commission make that list to make sure that that's always filled, in case Charlie doesn't do it.
Since Doug was doing it anyway, was it as a liaison? Or?
I don't know. I think some of it was when they were just getting started and they were doing a review of all of our buildings. So I think that's why he was probably going back then. That was a while ago, but yeah.
It would just be good to have, Charlie is more than sufficient. And it just would be great to be able to have the connection. So if it could be like an official liaison, I would,
Formal, right.
like, going on, to go on to make that list, that would be great.
Sure.
We'll add it to the list.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yep, come on down. The green light there.
Center button.
Hit the center. Nope. Down towards you.
This is push.
Down towards you. Push.
There it is. Okay.
Light.
Paul Cotius, 28 Pine Street. Two things came up during the meeting. One of them was electric cars versus fossil fuel cars, and I wanted to raise my hand and say there's something called a pluggable hybrid, which is 6 car companies make inexpensive ones. I happen to own one. I get about 100 miles per gallon. They're small batteries, so they don't take gobs of rare materials, and they're very affordable, so you might consider that. The other was a discussion about whether, I think it was about window ratings, and it was about, I think, maybe a U rating and a PGCC rating or something. And so I looked at replacing some of the windows in my home, and I got a quote of about $500 a window for an Anderson A400, which is a pretty good one. But I work for Habitat for Humanity, and they got a set of triple panes from Matthew Brothers and said that the price was lower than the Andersons, and these are like 0.26 or 0.25/0.3. So I think they're talking about $500 a window, not $500 more a window, to get to the stretch code efficiencies.
What was the name of the car you mentioned at the beginning? The hybrid?
Pluggable hybrid.
So the companies that make pluggable hybrids
Pluggable.
are Honda, Hyundai, Ford, Chrysler, Toyota, Jeep, and that's just the low-end ones. Now, there's no pluggable truck, hybrid truck, but I was scanning industry, this and that, and people are thinking that maybe this year, or, I'm sorry, next model season, that somebody will come forward, because it just makes sense. I mean, the Ford F-150 looks good, but still, there's a market for the in-between. Thank you.
thank you.
You.
Very much, Paul.
I want to applaud you for moving forward with the application for green communities, and thank Leanne Drake for such a clear and concise presentation of the program. I assure you that there are many, many town success stories. I've written 4 myself. I've done studies on 4 towns on the Cape, Mashpee, Yarmouth, Chatham, and Wellfleet. They're very happy with their decision. It's helped them to save capital investments as well as operating expense. And with the cost of energy the way it is these days, anything we can do to reduce the cost of energy, namely conserving it, all the better. So I applaud you, and I also want to clarify that you can build a home to stretch code for less than a stick-built house, is the way I put it. I built one over on Lake Wequacket for 15% less, and it's built to stretch code. And it's a 2,500 square foot house, and it's a beauty. So just to assure you that you can build them for less. And that's without all the rebates and everything. So thank you, and you've done the town a real favor here.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, we'll go move to closing remarks. Charlie?
Go ahead, Bob. You first.
Just for the public, Bud, what time does the 4th of July event start?
Well, I think the road race is early, like 7 or 8. I should know this by now, and I don't.
Yeah.
I don't want to give you the wrong. It's all over the website on the recreation page, and I think I'm sure there's going to be something in the enterprise about it as well.
What time does the parade start, you know?
We walk on that one?
Yeah, we're walking on that one, I guess. What time it starts? 10?
It's usually 10.
10 o'clock usually?
Band concert's 7.
Well, you want to read it, Meg? Good, Bob. You want to read it off?
Let's see, here we go.
Yeah, it's early, yeah. I'm going to say it was 11.
Oh, okay. All right, we got here, Spirit Sandwich Parade. New start time, 11 o'clock.
Oh, moved it up.
Wow,
Sleeping in.
okay. Egg toss, 12:30.
School?
Wing School, picnic in the park there, 12 to 2. I don't see, met with the fire chief today, and we're gonna try to do the foam this year for the kids. Foam? Excuse me. Yep, the soap suds like we've done for 30 years. That'll be right there, right around with the egg toss, around noontime probably. We got the band concert, Sean Pond, from 7:30 to 9:30. Moonlighters, boat parade, we're not gonna.
Fireworks at 10.
Yeah, boat parade's out because of what we got in the pond there. And the fireworks, I guess at 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock.
Yep. Okay.
And there's still room for parade floats if you so dare.
Yep. Yeah, road race, new start time, 8 a.m. for the road race.
At the wing?
Yes, it starts at 1.
Wings?
I think so.
Doing volunteer work?
Race day registration. Registration opens up at 6:30 a.m. Pre-registration, now open online. Okay.
Yes.
Yep,
Fireworks are back, folks.
yep. And this is all in the Sandwich Rec Department site.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
She gave you that.
I know, it's gave me, I get to keep this, right? Yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, just
Charlie, good.
Just a couple of quick ones. Let's continue to maintain those under attack in the war in Eastern Europe in our thoughts and prayers as world peace is threatened. And therefore, as we plan for the return of an active and traditional Independence Day celebration on July 4th here in Sandwich, we should count the blessings and thank all who protect our independence.
Here, here. And just one thing I noticed is that as people come back into town this year, it seems like they're back early, as they went through. And so far, everything seems to be working, very smoothly. And, a lot of the new attractions in town, on our waterfront, I've seen that a lot of people in there and things have been relatively smooth. So it's good to see.
Grist Mill and Hoxie House are open.
Yeah, so both are open. We have more docents at the Hoxie House than we do at the mill, and there's certain safety things at the mill. So I think the goal is to have the Hoxie House 5 to 6 days a week. The mill's probably going to be 3, but all depending on the people that we have. And since I last updated you, we've gotten more people to step forward for our DPW, seasonal laborers, and a couple of other spots. We're still short in some areas, but not as bad as some of the other towns that we've been hearing about some of their experiences. So
Are we using volunteers or paid?
it's paid.
Paid?
Yep.
Does anybody have any? Motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Our next meeting is Thursday, July 7th at 7 PM. We will see you then. Thank you.